My name is Anne Riitho, and I will be your host today. I'm a co-founder of the Byte screening platform, and I'm thrilled to have you join us for this important discussion on restricted party screening. So whether you're an importer, exporter, broker, or just interested in the intricacies of restricted party screening, you're in the right place. A few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. This webinar is live, but don't worry if you miss something. We are recording it. The recording will be shared after the end of the meeting, and you can always revisit it in the future in the coming weeks through our YouTube channel. Throughout today's session, we do encourage questions using the Q&A box located at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will have time for a live Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in there, and we will get those out. So today we're joined by two great speakers who bring a wealth of experience and hands-on knowledge to this topic. So first we have Michael Ronayne, a leader in trade enforcement. Mike has years of experience in enforcement as a special agent with Homeland Security investigations, and more recently in helping businesses understand the complexities of global trade, making him a trusted voice in the industry. So thank you for being here, Mike.
Thanks.
Next, I'm pleased to introduce Thariq Kara, the co-founder of Byte and a key innovator in trade data and analytics screening technologies. With a career spanning regulatory technology and government collaboration, Tariq's insights are always invaluable. Thanks, Thariq.
Thanks, Anne. Great to be on.
So throughout today's session, we'll go through some of the challenges of restricted party screening, who regulates, who enforces sanctions, and some real-world examples of non-compliance. We will also explore actionable solutions to streamline the process, reduce risk, and ensure compliance. So without any further ado, let's get started. I will hand it over to Mike, our first speaker, to kick things off.
Thank you, Anne. Appreciate it. So when we're discussing restricted parties and screening, we're basically talking about businesses and people that the U.S. government has prohibited or at least restricted trade with. These lists are based on national security and foreign policy objectives, and also to control sensitive U.S. technology to ensure that it isn't winding up in the wrong hands overseas. So today I'm going to talk about the primary government agencies and their lists, why screening is critical, and I'll throw in a couple real-world examples from my career to try to illustrate why it's so critical to conduct the screening process. So in terms of my background, as you said, Anne, I was a special agent with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the U.S. Customs Service for more than 20 years. I served in various roles as an agent, one of which was the unit chief for HSI's Counterproliferation Investigations Unit, where I was responsible for oversight of HSI's counterproliferation program at the national level. And I finished my career just prior to joining New Borders as the assistant special agent in charge for global trade investigations at HSI Boston. And just as a note, typically trade investigations, international trade investigations are conducted at the federal level by Homeland Security Investigations, the Department of Commerce, and the FBI. So when we're talking about restricted party screening, and as you said, importers, exporters, logistics, but really, if you're dealing with the international community in any aspect of business, it's really critical that you're conducting screening process and that you're conducting the process early on in the transaction. And every business in the international community has a responsibility to screen. Banks, it's critical, and for financial institutions, the Bank Secrecy Act, which was enacted in 1970, went on the books, and as part of that, it requires financial institutions to have written compliance programs in place. And when it was amended as part of the Patriot Act in 2001, it added customer identification programs to place screening on account holders to ensure, among other things, that they're not subject to U.S. sanctions. So in the United States, we're going to talk about three primary regulatory agencies: the Department of Commerce, the Department of State, and the Department of Treasury. So with the Department of Commerce, the Bureau of Industry and Security, there are essentially four lists that you should be screening against. And they're somewhat self-explanatory in their name. The entity list really is not, but it places specific licensing requirements on goods that are subject to controls. The denied persons list, which is basically anybody that Commerce has deemed to be denied. They do not have export privileges and they cannot engage in international trade with U.S. person or U.S. parties. The unverified list, which is basically Commerce has seen a transaction and upon conducting an end-use check in the country where the product was destined, was unable to verify the address or verify the consignee or identify the recipient. So those people are subsequently placed on the unverified list. And then very self-explanatory, the military end user list. So anybody the Department of Commerce deems as a military end user, a license is required to conduct any sort of transaction with those parties. The Department of State plays two roles as part of the Office of Economic Sanctions and Policy and Implementation. They provide foreign policy guidance to OFAC and Commerce on sanctions. As part of their Directorate of Defense Trade Controls, or DDTC, as it's probably more commonly referred to, they oversee the debarred parties list. And the debarred parties list includes anybody who's been convicted of a violation of the Arms Export Control Act, which is basically they've violated the international trafficking in arms regulations and violated some element of a crime regulated for defense article services or technical data. And then finally, the Department of Treasury under the Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, they focus on specific country programs, narcotics traffickers, terrorists, and counterproliferation of weapons of mass destruction. And their list is the SDN list and the blocked persons list. And these are basically global entities that are blocked based on their sanctions programs. So we've covered the list. I'd like to just jump in, kind of talk about why it's critical to screen. I think first and foremost, as a U.S. party, you don't want to be contributing to any sort of program that the U.S. has deemed to be harmful to either national security or foreign policy. We certainly don't want to find our technology being used against innocent citizens or our troops overseas. But also as a U.S. person, you have, or really any person, you have significant criminal exposure. And we're only going to talk a few minutes about the screening process here. So I'm not going to jump into all the statutes and how they apply, but essentially I think the biggest thing to know is that the penalties carry up to 20 years imprisonment, as well as fines up to $1 million per violation. So pretty significant penalties. That's on the criminal side. On the administrative side, there's also pretty significant penalties, to include temporary denial orders, which are handed down from the Assistant Secretary of Commerce. And those revoke export privileges. So when you're dealing with that kind of penalty, clearly you're at risk of seriously damaging your revenue generation as well as your reputation. So in my career, I investigated and supervised hundreds of international trade and counterproliferation investigations. Just a couple examples of sort of why screening is so critical. And I'll give you three case examples. One is we investigated an Iranian procurement network that was actively trying to acquire U.S. technology for Iran to build phased array radar and to upgrade their F-4 aircraft. And this individual was subsequently arrested and imprisoned, contacted hundreds, if not thousands, of U.S. businesses trying to acquire these parts. So certainly, as a business, you do not want to have any part of doing a business transaction with someone like that. Also, supervised a case of a Chinese national who was working with both Russian and Chinese hackers to steal protected intellectual property in the form of software that was some of which had military applications. And then finally, we investigated a case of an individual in Pennsylvania who was shipping U.S. lab equipment to Syria, and this equipment was used in the detection of chemical warfare agents. So these are specific, real examples of people seeking controlled goods and controlled U.S. technology. So with that in mind, when you receive an inquiry from a foreign customer, it's absolutely critical that you initiate the screening process. Just real briefly, the last case, sort of to illustrate the importance of it. In the last case involving Syria, when we spoke to this individual, he said, once it leaves here, it's not my problem. And unfortunately for him, that is not true. It is your problem. You are responsible for the screening process. And a statement like that's not only very telling, it's also, somewhat evidentiary in nature, because he has the ability, because now we have the ability to use that statement to help establish probable cause for a search warrant, which we did. He was ultimately arrested and charged in an international conspiracy. Now, conversely, if when I asked him about his export activities, he said, I conducted as much screening as possible. As soon as I got the inquiry, I tried to verify the end use as well as I possibly could. I have emails here from the customer saying that it's staying in this location, and he verified it. Then he's in a significantly different position. And at that point, he's drastically reduced his criminal exposure. So just remember, as an exporter, it's your responsibility to understand who the ultimate consignees are, and potentially any applications of the products that you are dealing in. So that's an example of a criminal penalty. In terms of an administrative case, in August, BIS announced a settlement on a penalty of almost $6 million for two companies in Pennsylvania and in Hong Kong that were tied to sending what they deemed low-level items with ties to the PRC military weapons and electronics programs. It's alleged that almost $2 million in goods were exported and destined for these parties. And specifically, they were sent to parties that were on the entity list. So they would have required a license for a lawful export. Now, in this case, it was a voluntary disclosure by the company where they identified the problem, understood that something had occurred, and went and spoke to Commerce. So that does mitigate the penalty dramatically, typically. But one significant note that I found in the announcement that I thought was interesting, and I just wanted to bring to your attention, and I'll read it because it's a quote. It said, the company's party screening efforts also failed to identify an obvious alternative spelling of a party on the entity list. So this is an expensive failure on part of the U.S. company, and better screening, with better screening, maybe these exports don't happen. So I'll wrap it up there. I'm hopeful I was able to provide you with some background on restricted party screening and why this is such an important process.
Great. Thanks so much, Mike. Yeah, that last quote is really interesting. So thanks for sharing that. I'm going to hand it over to Thariq now. I know this is mostly trade compliance, but just if you could briefly touch on a few of the other industries that should be screening for restricted parties. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, thanks. And I just wanted to kind of reiterate some of Mike's points were with regard to due diligence, right? And as long as you can provide a proof point that you've been doing the screening, you've been looking, you haven't just let it go. I think that's super important to point out, and then providing that audit trail. And just so the participants know, Anne will demo some of those tools that help you do that shortly here. But yeah, looking at other industries, the financial sector, doing the money laundering, the AML screening, looking at restricted parties, denied entities, even KYC, enhanced due diligence around second and third tier relationships to denied entities is important. We haven't really touched on, so there's restricted parties, and then there's beneficial ownership, politically exposed persons, or what we would term high risk entities, right? And that's really at the discretion of the company or the organization doing the screening, right? That data is available, and obviously in tools like Byte, whether or not it's necessary for you to screen to that level, that's something that would depend on your controls and your sensitivities, and then looking at other industries, for example, Airbnb got fined last year for allowing transactions from Cuba. So software as a service as well is an industry or a technology set that has to do screening as well. And I think there were situations where online HR and hiring platforms ended up providing hires, North Korean hires, DPRK hires to defense industry companies in the US. And, part of that was just a lack of checking whether both their location and or if they were a restricted country. So within the controls and within the import-export compliance space, DPRK, Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, and parts of the Crimea, places like that, the whole, it's all restricted. And Mike, you'd know more, about that from the kind of AOR perspective. But those are some areas that this kind of applies to. But yeah, I'll pass that. But just sorry, before we do that though, going back to global trade, for importers, exporters, manufacturers, it's really important that you understand who your vendors and suppliers are as well. I think, being able to understand the chain of custody for the commodities and the goods as they come into your supply chain is important. Being able to do that screening, it is work. There are tools out there that automate those aspects, but from a global trade perspective, the restricted party screening, sanction screening is just super important.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to actually jump into a demo of Byte right now. So we've heard a lot about why it's important, and I think usually people know they should be doing it, but either it's too time consuming or it's too hard. So just a quick demo of one tool that can help you with your processes. So I'm actually just on bytedata.io, the website. I'm going to go to log in, and I'm logged into the app. And I apologize, my internet isn't great, so let me just get logged in again. There we go.
At least it's sunny in Kenya, so. Oh.
Yeah, it's nice weather here today. So yeah, starting off in Byte, very easy to head over to the screening module. People and companies, we try to make it very simple, so you can search up to 5 names at a time. In this case, I'm going to search Ahmed. And I'm going to go ahead and just press enter. And you can see the results that I've gotten back here down below. I have 12 results. And if I open up one of these down here, you can see I typed in Hamid, Hamid, and down here on OFAC, it's spelled DEH. And I'm just highlighting this kind of, Mike, to your point, when you're looking at a screening tool, in this case, this is an alternative name. So you want to make sure that you're not only running against an exact match, but also a lot of these screening lists, OFAC included, BIS, will include alternative names as well. So just making sure that you're always screening against an entire record. Similarly, I'm going to search for another entity here. And this time I'm going to turn on entity resolution. So what this is a fuzzy matching capability. And so I've typed in how I think it's spelled or how I got it from my paperwork. And we can see here again, results come up that there's a Y here and not an I. So I had my spelling wrong, but after turning on my entity resolution, I was still able to pick this up. So Mike, again, to that quote you added at the end, being able to use fuzzy matching, search alternative names, those are all something to be looking for in a tool, and Byte has that here. So I also want to quickly show some of the features of the screening module. So in the few examples I've shown, I haven't gotten very many results back. But if you do search something and you get thousands of results, You can, we'll go ahead and search Kingdom, see what hits. And I do have my entity resolution on, so I'll probably get quite a bit here. So yeah, millions of records now. So what you can do to filter those down is use the lens feature. And what this does is really target you in on certain areas that you may be interested in. So whether it be beneficial ownership or forced labor, we even have a number of most wanted lists in here. So depending on what you are screening for, you may pick a different lens. So in this case, I can just pick restricted parties. But I've also done this a few times, so I've saved a few filters here. So I just want to screen against OFAC, I can do that. No results there. I can screen against my forced labor lists. No results there, and so on. In this case, I want to include, we'll just go ahead and do all US restricted parties. Search. And in this case, I got my Kingdom Aluminio, which if you've been watching the news recently, this is a entity that was recently added to have a withhold release order due to its connections to forced labor. This entity is in the Dominican Republic. So when you do open the hit, you get a number of, you get other information here as well to help validate your hit. And then also includes links to other resources so that you can go and do additional research if you want to, and also to validate your findings. Another thing I just wanted to point out here, kind of to the same point as the beginning in the alternative names, a lot of lists, including OFAC, sometimes they may include, especially for their cyber programs, they may include an email. So it's not always, this isn't like you search an email, you don't get a hit, then like I'm good to go. But it is always good just to take that additional step to show you not only ran the name, you ran the email and so on. So in this case, this entry does have an email address and quite a few other kind of alias names that look like there's some, tag for different platforms. So you can search on those. And then finally, also something really important these days, if you are dealing in crypto at all, you can also search crypto addresses. So again, it does have to be in the listing, but you can see there is quite a bit of information that you can be searching against here. So all of these data points, are things that you can be running and searching against. And obviously, to go through every data point that you have on each one of your vendors or your suppliers is really challenging. So we do have a bulk feature in Byte that allows you to upload a CSV, and then it returns your results to the vault. So you can either download one of our templates or you can upload your own. And then I'll just open up a vault ticket over here. And what this does is keep an audit trail of everything that you searched on. And so if someone does come knocking or you find something later on, you can say, I searched on, the name, I searched on the email, I searched on the address, and so on. So in this case, this is a November suppliers. So this is a list of suppliers that I ran in the month of November. And you can see everything that you inputted, what it searched it based on, a PDF, and then you can actually open up the results down below. And in this case, I had also included some HS codes and commodities in my search, and that's what these results are down here. And you can click through your results. This is also exportable to Excel. So again, this bulk feature is just trying to make the screening more efficient and easier for users. Another note in bulk, in the Byte app, if you are a user, then we do have notifications and also a running list of lists as they are updated. But we don't want to gatekeep that from anyone. So we do also have a Slack channel that I will just quickly show here. Slack's a pretty easy tool if you're not familiar with it. It's free. You can sign up. And you don't have to be a Byte user, but we are trying to get this information out to as many people as possible. And you can subscribe to different channels. So if you're only interested in restricted party screening, then you can join this restricted party channel. I think Thariq will put the link in the chat for anyone who's interested. And it's just a running list of lists that are updated. So on Tuesday, the 10th, 4 records were added to OFAC. The total records went up this much. To see who those records are, you do have to log into Byte, or you can search a press release. But so what this is just trying to keep you updated. We also do have commodity controls. I know today we're talking about restricted party screening, but if anyone does also have interest in commodity controls, this is great. It keeps you updated on changes to PGA codes, U.S. dumping orders, 301 tariffs, which are changing pretty frequently. So a great resource for anyone who wants to stay up to date on the changing regulations. So just headed back to Byte for one last comment here. We also have Byte GPT. This is an OpenAI integration. And what it does is searches first on the data in Byte and then goes out to the internet. And I typically use it to summarize the findings that I've already found. I am not sure that I'm going to demo it right now just because my internet is pretty bad and I don't want to leave everyone waiting if it's a little bit slow. But you can ask basic questions, it gets the return. I typically then copy that output and put it in my vault ticket. And then just finally going back, I did want to just again highlight we've talked a lot about restricted party screening. Mike went through the agencies that are enforcing it, the different people that put out lists, but the lenses here really help to organize all of that information. So we have over 350 lists in Byte. So when you do search, you should feel confident that you're running a pretty comprehensive search there. And if you ever are in Byte and you see a list missing, we always welcome that feedback and would love to hear from you if there's a list here that you don't see that you think is important for people to be screening against. So with that, I will hand it back to Thariq to talk through a little bit of the product roadmap for Byte and kind of where we're going in the new year.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Appreciate that. And there are quite a few learning resources on the platform as well in our Byte U module that's in the left nav there. But yeah, from both a restricted and commodity screening, parties and commodity screening perspective, we've got a new module called Monitor coming in. And Monitor will let you screen specific forms for both entities and commodities. So for example, bill of lading, bill of manifest, bill of materials, bill of lading or manifest, ACE forms. You can also create a supplier check form and send that securely to your suppliers. They can input data about themselves. We then run a screen on that data and send it back. We're also going to be integrating with or enhancing our API so that, if you have an ERP, wanted to check our data, that will happen pretty seamlessly once you connect up on the back end. And soon after that, we are going to enhance our commodities classification process as well. So we've got an AI tool in the works right now. It'll walk you through kind of like a TurboTax type wizard where you put in your commodity or HS code and it gives you the correct up to the 10 digit as well as a good commodity or product description, which is going to become super important next year with some of the regulatory guidance we're hearing about. So yeah, that's all I had, Anne.
Great, thanks. So that brings us to the end of our real content for today. But I did want to, as promised, open it up for any questions that have come up, whether it be on the Byte platform or on sanctions in general. Please feel free to pop those in the Q&A box. Or even if it's just, how do I access Slack? Happy to answer those types of questions as well.
And while people are thinking of questions, I know sometimes we didn't touch on the EU as well. So if you have an EU holding or you want the EU restricted parties, we have those as well. Denied parties. So sometimes you'll hear the word denied parties or entities interchanged with restricted parties. So depends on agency and location sometimes.
Thariq, I think you prompted someone. How much do I need to concern myself with EU sanctions if I'm a US exporter? Mike,
Mike, you want to
wanna
take that?
field that one for us?
Yeah. So if you're a U.S. exporter, you certainly want to be aware of all the sanctions. The companies and the parties are designated, whether it's in the U.S. or EU or one of the other companies, one of the other countries, excuse me, based on conduct they're conducting. So while maybe technically you might not be in violation if you mistakenly send something to somebody designated in the EU, or if you send something to somebody in the EU, but as an exporter, I think you always want to be aware of who you're dealing with. Certainly, if you conduct restricted party screening early on in the process, and you see that they are designated by the EU, you really want to be very cautious and probably not conduct that transaction.
And also, I think for your second, third party folks in your supply chain, post shipment, I think you'd want to protect, the entirety of the supply chain as much as possible. I think there have been cases where, maybe you are the manufacturer, but more and more brokers, freight forwarders, other people in the supply chain are getting affected by violations. So, I think it's important to, if you are sending stuff to the EU, if you see someone on an EU denied list, to at least log that in your audit, in your process and your compliance processes, and let the person doing the business in the EU let them know of the potential risk. In which case, sorry, just to be clear, if you don't have a holding in the EU, if you've got a holding company, maybe not registered in the US, but part of your larger group of companies, for sure, then you've got to, take action with that.
Great. Next question. Can Byte's platform map out connections of entities that appear in the platform?
From a
Thariq, do
visualization,
you want to take that one?
yeah, we don't visualize that for you, but we do give it to you, give you the data point. So, for example, we have high risk entities that we put in that have done business with other sanctioned entities. So you can certainly search for it, and you can export the data and put it into a visualization tool very easily as well. So, maybe use Tableau or some other tool, Microsoft BI. You can upload the data, connect to our backend, our API, and get your data into your visualization tool of choice.
And then next question, is Byte's platform data agnostic to other data providers as a list source?
Actually, that's on the roadmap. So being able to upload your own data sources or data sets to screen against is something that we should have in the next 2 to 3 months. So we can absolutely be agnostic. We've had many requests, like, for example, if another company has a blacklist or a company in another country has their own screening list, being able to upload that and screen against it is something that you'll be able to do, fairly shortly here.
Great. All right. Doesn't look like anything else has come in. Those are all great questions. And if you do have additional questions on the Byte platform specifically, please feel free to email any one of us. And also, if you do go to our website and set up a demo through the website, it'll be with me. So nice to meet you ahead of time. And Thariq will most likely be on there as well. So feel free to get in touch with us that way. And also on the Slack channel, if you search there, we're also there. So please feel free to reach out anytime with additional questions on the Byte platform. So with that, I'll give Mike and Thariq, do you have any last thoughts before we wrap up here?
Yeah, just kind of looking at that one question though, is Byte platform data agnostic to other data providers as a list source? I assume that was us ingesting other data, but with the flip side as well, if you wanted to get our data and put it into another data provider's data system, you can do that via API as well. I just wanted to make sure that to clear up, it's bidirectional.
Great. Mike, I saw you. Did you have any final thoughts for the
No,
group here?
nothing additional from me. Thank you, Ann.
All right. Well, thank you so much for everyone who participated today. As I said at the beginning, we will post this on our YouTube page and on our website. And please feel free, like I said, to visit bytedata.io to learn more about Byte. We do have a number of use cases on the website, and we do monthly webinars on different topics. So we'll see you again next month. Happy holidays.
Thank you.